Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we have an intense and emotional story to share with you. Imagine being in a seemingly perfect marriage, only for everything to unravel because of a single mistake. Our story starts with Jenny and Deegan, a young couple deeply in love, navigating life together until an unexpected affair throws their relationship into turmoil. Jenny is overwhelmed with guilt and struggles to decide whether to confess or stay silent. But that's not all. We also delve into the life of another couple, where a husband's suspicions lead him to uncover shocking truths about his wife's infidelity. This emotional roller coaster reveals the raw human experience of betrayal, heartbreak, and the fight for redemption. Stick around as we explore these gripping tales of love, trust, and the consequences of breaking that trust. It's a powerful journey through the complexities of human relationships, and you won't want to miss it. Let's dive in. I can't believe I'm the one writing this, but here I am. To keep things confidential, I'll speak in general terms and use fake names. Let's call my husband Deegan and me Jenny. We're both in our 20s and have been married for over 2 years. We crossed paths unexpectedly in public, started chatting, exchanged contact info, and the rest, as they say, is history. It felt like love at first sight, at least for me. We dated for 6 months and then lived together for a year before tying the knot. Due to my parents' insistence, we had a large wedding. They covered all the expenses except for the bar tab and our honeymoon, which Deegan's parents paid for. My parents adore Deegan, and his parents have a deep affection for me. Our marriage has been fantastic, and I wouldn't change a thing. Deegan treats me exceptionally well, and I do the same for him. It's just our natural way of expressing love. Now you might wonder what's the issue here. Well, the problem is that I cheated on Deegan with a colleague from work 2 months ago, and now I'm burdened with guilt. Whenever Deegan does something kind for me, I feel terrible inside. I'm overwhelmed with guilt and a sense of not deserving his kindness. In an attempt to make amends for my betrayal, I've been exceptionally attentive to him since we returned from our trip. While we've always been naturally affectionate with each other, I'm taking it to another level. My dad even playfully teases us, suggesting we get a room because we're constantly engaged in some form of public display of affection. Like I mentioned earlier, I won't delve into details, but I want to clarify how things unfolded with my coworker. I was chosen to join a special work team at my company. This project was a significant venture for the company and held great importance for our shareholders. Working on this assignment was satisfying but incredibly demanding and stressful, to the extent that one of our team members, a woman, experienced a nervous breakdown. Most of our work on the project was done remotely, but we did have 3 in-person team meetings along the way. As we neared the project's completion, something went wrong with the part one was responsible for. This required me to spend a week at one of our regional offices to fix the issue. Initially, 3 of us were scheduled to go, but at the last minute, the woman I mentioned who had a nervous breakdown had to cancel for obvious reasons. This left me and another coworker, whom I'll call Percy, to tackle the problem and ensure the project met its deadline. We were on a tight schedule and worked continuously from 7 am to well past 10 p.m. for the first 2 nights, spending every available moment together. We worked together in the office and ordered food for both lunch and dinner. I was highly stressed and felt like I was about to have a nervous breakdown as well. Thankfully, by 4 p.m. on Wednesday, we solved the problem. To celebrate, we went to a nice restaurant and drank a bit too much. After returning to the hotel, one thing led to another, and I cheated on my husband. It was a spontaneous, thoughtless action. At first, I didn't have any negative feelings about it because I somehow justified it due to our hard work. So, the next night, Percy and I repeated what we did the night before. However, after being together on Thursday, the harsh reality of our actions hit Percy and me. We quickly regretted what we had done. Percy knew I was happily married, and I knew he was engaged to be married. We decided right then and there to forget it as if it never happened. We were also worried that if news of this affair got out within our company, it could damage our reputations and potentially jeopardize our jobs since it occurred during a company-paid business trip. We went our separate ways that night. On the flight back home, I felt fine at first, but then I started feeling anxious when I thought about meeting Deegan at the airport. I managed to hold myself together until I reached the pickup area and saw him waiting there, wearing a big smile. As soon as I laid eyes on him, I burst into tears, and we hugged and kissed each other repeatedly, holding on tightly. We were locked in that embrace for so long that an airport police officer approached us, tapping on the window and signaling us to clear the pickup lane. Deegan asked me what was wrong, and I explained that I had been under immense stress and missed him so much that I couldn't help but break down when I saw him. He understood, and we shared a beautiful and passionate night that night. Since I returned from the trip, I've been taking extra care of him. He's enjoying and deserves the attention, but inside, I'm suffering. Guilt is eating away at my mind, and it's getting worse by the day. I struggle with sleep and appetite, and it's affecting my work. All I want is to be close to my husband and show him how much I love him. I even have recurring nightmares about him discovering the affair and leaving me. Last week, we decided to try to conceive a child, which has heightened my emotions about everything. I keep thinking that I don't deserve him or that he deserves someone better. I don't believe I can continue like this for another week. No one knows about the affair except for Percy and me. My situation gets even more challenging because I have nobody to confide in. I sense my inner conscience urging me to be truthful and tell Deegan about my actions, but I'm terrified that it will cost me our relationship. I understand that if I confess, it will devastate him, and he might not see me the same way again. However, given his deep love for me and his naturally kind and caring nature, I believe he might eventually forgive me. So here's my dilemma. Should I disclose my meaningless affair from 2 months ago to my husband, or should I stay silent and make amends in other ways? I'd appreciate hearing from those who faced a similar situation and how you handled it. Please be honest and share both the positive and negative outcomes. I want to thank all of you for your heartfelt responses. I've carefully read each and value your willingness to share your experiences. After much contemplation and 3 counseling sessions with an excellent therapist, I've decided to tell my husband. It will be incredibly tough for me, and it will undoubtedly devastate him, but it's something I have to do. To prepare for this, I've created a detailed timeline of the affair, which wasn't difficult since it was purely physical and lasted less than 24 hours without emotional involvement. My therapist has also provided me with some helpful articles on how to support a spouse dealing with infidelity and precisely what actions to avoid. I'm mentally prepared for the possibility that he might need some time apart from me. Based on what I've learned, this reaction is entirely normal. Although I would be saddened if he chose to react that way, as I mentioned earlier, my husband is an affectionate and caring man. He's generous and protective, so I don't anticipate him responding in that manner to this news. Instead, I believe he will be hurt and disappointed by my actions. I'm mentally prepared for a range of responses. Could you keep your fingers crossed for me? Hello, everyone, it's been some time since I last posted here. Many of you have reached out, inquiring about the progress of my situation. I am writing to express my gratitude for your interest and concern. I intended to provide an update earlier, but life got pretty hectic, and I didn't have the time or energy. Things have finally settled for me recently, so here I am. I'll continue where I left off. If you recall, I was about to confess to my husband about the short-lived affair I had with a coworker. I planned to have that conversation on a Saturday morning and followed through with it. I ensured we'd both be present that morning because we had plans for the afternoon, and I wanted to talk without interruptions. On the morning of the confession, I was a bundle of nerves and almost backed out of it. Looking back now, I wish I had. I prepared Deegan's favorite breakfast, and after we ate, I disclosed the affair to him. He listened attentively as I spoke without uttering a word. When I finished, he gazed at me as if peering through me. Then he excused himself and retreated to the office, closing the door behind him. I approached the door and attempted to turn the handle, but it was locked. I spoke to him through the door, reiterating how sorry I was and expressing my love for him. I told him I'd be waiting in the living room when he was ready to talk. Based on what I had read in articles, it suggested that those who have strayed should give the betrayed partner plenty of space, so that's precisely what I did. After a few minutes, I thought I heard him talking to someone, so I quietly returned to the door to see if I could make out the conversation. Unfortunately, I couldn't, so I returned to the living room. Then I received a call from my mom, which I let go to voicemail because I didn't have the time to talk to her. About 10 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. When I looked out, I saw my parents standing there. I opened the door and was about to suggest they come back later because Deegan and I were in the middle of a private discussion. However, my mom mentioned that Deegan had called them and confessed everything. I couldn't believe it and was left speechless. My dad asked if it was true, and I wondered if it was true. About what? My dad inquired. Did you have an affair with one of your coworkers? I admitted to it and started crying. My mom asked how I could do such a thing. Before I could respond, Deegan emerged from the office and began conversing with my parents, who ignored me and referred to me in the third person. He requested that my dad take me away from there as he wasn't in a good state of mind. I continued to try to communicate with him, but he kept ignoring me, focusing solely on my parents as though I were invisible. Desperate for his attention, I approached him and hugged him. Though he didn't push me away, he didn't hug me back either. After I let go of him, he returned to the office and locked the door. My parents began asking me questions about the affair, which upset me, and I ran into the bedroom. My mom followed me in, and we talked for a while, and then she helped me pack a few things. Before leaving, I spoke to Deegan through the door, expressing my love for him and saying I would stay away until he was ready to talk. I informed him that I was heading to my parents' house and would remain there as long as he needed. I have not received any communication from him for the rest of the day. I attempted to contact him several times, but he didn't respond. In my final text, I mentioned that I was coming over because I was worried about him. He replied and requested that I give him some space. I spent the entire day crying and repeatedly asking myself how something like this could happen. When I woke up on Sunday morning, my parents were sitting at the table drinking coffee with sad expressions on their faces. I thought they were upset about my actions, but there was more to it. My dad informed me that Deegan had come over earlier that morning. I was excited and inquired if they had spoken to him. My dad replied, "No, we didn't see him." I then asked how they knew he was there. My dad explained that it was because he had left my car with all my belongings in the driveway. Upon hearing this, I said, "What?" and rushed out to the driveway, where I saw my SUV parked and packed with trash bags. Seeing that, I broke down and fell to the ground crying. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. I told my parents I needed to go to my house to speak with Deegan. Upon my arrival, he was home but didn't answer the door. I attempted to unlock the doors using my keys, but the internal deadbolts were engaged, and I couldn't gain access. My next thought was to enter through the garage, but when I checked my visor, I realized Deegan had taken the remote. My idea was to enter through the garage keypad, but he had changed the code, effectively locking me out of my house. Given the early hours on a Sunday morning, I didn't want to disturb the neighbors, so I started texting him. Initially, I was polite, but when he didn't respond, I sent a text expressing that it was my place, too, and he couldn't lock me out. His response was, "Sue me." I couldn't believe that the man I had once loved deeply and who had been kind and caring was treating me this way. I knew I deserved consequences, but not like this. At the very least, I expected him to be civil and not behave like someone irrational. Ultimately, I returned to my parents' house, locked myself in my old room, and spent most of the day in tears, utterly bewildered by the events of the past 24 hours. Throughout the day, I continued my attempts to contact Deegan, but he remained unresponsive. I contacted my boss on Monday morning and requested 3 days off to address the situation. I returned to the house on Monday morning and managed to gain entry. Deegan was not there, and when I entered our bedroom, I noticed all his clothes were gone. When I entered the office, I saw something that shattered me. I discovered our wedding album cover beside the shredder, and Deegan had removed all the pictures and shredded them. I couldn't believe it. As I walked around the house, I noticed that all the images of us had disappeared. Upon further searching, I found the empty frames, and it became clear that he had also shredded those. I felt deeply saddened and couldn't comprehend what was unfolding. I decided to call Deegan's workplace and spoke with the receptionist. I inquired if I could talk to him, and she informed me that he wouldn't be in the office for the remainder of the week as he had taken off. I then reached out to my mother-in-law. She answered the call and mentioned that Deegan had already informed her and my father-in-law. I asked if she knew his whereabouts, and she confirmed that she did but declined to tell me and abruptly ended the conversation. I felt hurt by this situation as I had a close relationship with my in-laws. On Wednesday of that week, I started receiving calls from Percy. I chose to ignore all his calls and sent them to voicemail. Afterwards, when I listened to his messages, he urgently requested that I call him immediately. Finally, in his last message, he mentioned that Deegan had somehow contacted his fiancée and disclosed everything about the two of us. Upon hearing this, I called Percy, and he was angry. He reminded me that we had promised not to disclose anything to anyone. I acknowledged this and admitted that I should have informed him before speaking to my husband, but I hadn't anticipated his reaction. Percy then revealed that he had told his fiancée that my husband was lying and nothing had occurred. He told me she intended to call me, and he insisted I tell her the same story. I informed him I couldn't comply with that request, and he began pleading. Once I reiterated my refusal to lie, he started verbally attacking me using hurtful words and insults. He wouldn't stop, so I ended the call by hanging up on him and blocking his number. Shortly after, I received a call from his fiancée and disclosed everything to her. She remained silent as I recounted the events, and when I finished, she abruptly hung up. However, the ordeal didn't conclude there. When I returned to work the next day, I was summoned to the office of the HR director, who happened to be a friend of mine. Initially, I didn't suspect anything amiss, but upon arriving, I noticed the HR manager and the director of security were also present. I had a feeling I might be in trouble. They asked me to sit and mentioned they had questions for me. They informed me that they had been contacted by someone alleging that Percy and I had engaged in an affair during company time and had utilized company resources. My heart sank, and I started to cry. I then confessed what had occurred but clarified that nothing had happened during official work hours. The HR director explained that the entire trip is considered work time when salaried employees travel for business. She went on to clarify that the hotel room is regarded as a company resource since the company paid for it. They inquired about the second night when Percy and I were together. They asked if I had dinner with Percy that evening, and I reluctantly admitted that I had. They followed up by asking if I had consumed wine, to which I replied affirmatively, disclosing that I had 2 glasses. Next, they inquired if I had bought the wine, and I responded that I hadn't. Percy had made the purchase. The HR director pointed out that this violated company policy because employees cannot use another employee's card for food or drinks. As a result, I received a final written warning for these infractions, while Percy faced termination. To clarify, there was no preferential treatment due to my gender. Percy would have faced the same consequences if those were the only issues, but unfortunately for him, there was more to his situation. Percy got terminated because he extended his stay by an extra day without a legitimate reason and charged the entire expense, including the flight change fee, hotel stay, and all his meals, including the 2 bottles of wine. He extended his stay solely to be with me the following evening. I feel deeply remorseful about what happened to Percy. He was an outstanding employee with a promising future, but now he's unemployed, and his fiancée left him all because of my actions. As for me, any aspirations of getting a promotion in the aftermath of this incident seem unlikely. To add to the turmoil, Deegan had divorce papers served to me at the reception desk the following Monday at work. The receptionist called to inform me that there was an upfront delivery. As I arrived there, a man was waiting with a box of flowers. I hoped they were a gift from Deegan, and indeed they were. However, after I signed for the package, the man handed me the flowers and delivered the divorce papers, stating, "Mrs. Jenny, you have officially been served with divorce papers." My world fell apart then, and I couldn't hide my tears. I had to leave the office and decided to take the rest of the week off. Over the next 7 months, I made every effort to salvage my marriage, but Deegan refused to engage with me at all. He hasn't uttered a single word to me since I confessed. Our divorce has now been finalized, but I'm still struggling emotionally. I cherish and miss the kind man he used to be before my affair, but I understand that person no longer exists. I acknowledge that I deserve to face the consequences of my actions, but I never anticipated Deegan's reaction. I knew there was a slim chance that my confession could end our relationship, but that likelihood was exceedingly rare. I want to conclude with a message for my husband. Babe, if you ever come across this, I want you to know that I am genuinely sorry and will love you eternally. Alright, that was a tough story. Now, let's move on to another exciting one. Stay tuned, and let's dive in. I'm 36 years old, and my wife is 38. We first crossed paths when I was in my third year of college and she was in her fourth. Since that day, we've been together. After dating for 3 years, we decided to move in together. Then, after 3 more years, we tied the knot. 2 years later, our happiness grew when my wife became pregnant, and we welcomed our daughter. Like any typical family, we had our fair share of domestic disagreements, but we always managed to reconcile swiftly, sometimes even in the middle of an argument. In general, we were a traditional family. Once I completed my education, I embarked on my career journey, working hard to climb the corporate ladder. Eventually, I earned enough to afford a spacious 4-room apartment. We invested significantly in renovating it and happily settled into our new home. After her maternity leave, my wife resumed her career, which went quite smoothly. She secured a good position and started earning a decent income. With our combined earnings, we achieved financial prosperity. Over time, we acquired everything we needed, including a new apartment for our growing daughter, luxurious cars, and all the comforts one could desire. Life felt abundant. I deeply loved my wife and remained faithful to her throughout our marriage. I wasn't a heavy drinker, but occasionally, I'd enjoy a glass of wine with dinner. I recently gave up smoking. We always planned our vacations together, and I developed a passion for diving and skiing. While my wife chose not to dive due to fear, she skied. Our lives revolved around working, earning money, and savoring the rewards of our hard work. My wife's job was related to international business, often involving meetings with colleagues from abroad for negotiations. Gradually, I noticed that her interactions with these colleagues were longer than before. While it initially piqued my curiosity, I didn't pay much attention to it. Another notable change was her receiving Snapchat messages in the evenings. Oddly, when her foreign colleagues were around, these messages stopped coming. A couple of times, I checked her phone after she had fallen asleep, but all the messages had been deleted. I observed that the last message consistently arrived around 7 p.m., even though her phone received notifications after she had already gone to bed. In the end, suspicion completely consumed me. One evening, she arrived home late, around 10 p.m., and I, perhaps foolishly jokingly, inquired if she had bid farewell to her secret admirer. I witnessed a fear in her eyes like never before. However, once she realized I was teasing, she smiled and dismissed it, calling me a fool. Furthermore, she occasionally traveled abroad to visit her colleagues. In return, when my suspicions peaked, I reached a breaking point. I resorted to installing spyware on her phone and enabling remote control through SMS or my account. This software could capture audio from her surroundings, take pictures with the camera, and send all the data to my account. One day, she embarked on another business trip. In the evening, after spending time with our daughter, assisting her with homework, and putting her to bed by 10 p.m., I accessed the spyware account and instructed it to record her phone's surroundings for 10 minutes. A few minutes later, a recording popped up on my account, and upon listening, I heard my wife's voice in a room with a man. They conversed in English, and I comprehended every word. Their discussion revolved around ordinary life matters accompanied by laughter. I realized they were alone in that room. Then, a sudden clinking of glasses amid their laughter raced through my heart. At that instant, I sent another command to record an additional 20 minutes and capture an image of the surroundings. Shockingly, the photo came out as a dark square, indicating the phone was placed with the camera facing down. Swiftly, I directed the program to snap a picture using the front camera. The resulting photo showed the phone resting on the bedside table in the room, partially capturing the bed's headboard and an adjacent wall lamp. 15 minutes later, another recording emerged, sending shivers down my spine. Their laughter and conversation filled my ears once more as I played it. I found myself in disbelief and shock, as if my entire world were collapsing right before my eyes. Stunned, I poured myself a drink and instructed the program to record for an additional 4 hours, during which I drowned my sorrows in alcohol. The following morning, Thursday, I was utterly shattered. As it was time for my daughter to go to school, I informed her that she didn't need to attend classes that day. I also notified my boss that I would take some personal days until Monday. My wife's expected return was on Sunday, so I settled down and began listening to the 4-hour recording. However, I could only bear to listen for 40 minutes because, at that moment, I unmistakably heard the sounds of my wife's pleasure. The same sounds I had known for over 13 years. It felt like a sharp knife had pierced my heart, causing both emotional and physical anguish. Stunned and overwhelmed, I hurried to the bathroom, feeling nauseous. I couldn't tell if it was a hangover or the current situation was causing it. I stood under a freezing shower for 20 minutes, desperately seeking relief. Afterwards, I took our daughter to visit her grandparents, promising to explain everything later, and then returned home alone. During lunch, my wife called and genuinely inquired about my well-being. I stood there in silence, unable to utter a word, feigning a poor connection. I informed her that I wasn't feeling well and would stay home for a few days, entrusting our daughter to her grandmother's care. That day felt like the most agonizing of my life. I experienced a personal hell, feeling utterly lost and unsure of how to proceed. My mind was consumed by a constant buzzing that drowned out my thoughts. I sat on the couch and wept like a child, overwhelmed by waves of anger and apathy. The more I let my emotions out, the more they seemed to numb me. By the day's end, I was emotionally drained. In the evening, I returned to the spyware account and began giving commands to the phone. I received photos, some taken from her bag and others from the table. There were recordings of her restaurant performances with numerous voices, presumably her colleagues. Then, as the evening progressed, I stumbled upon something different. The phone was again on the bedside table, capturing her voice and someone else's. However, this time, there were no intimate sounds. Unable to endure it any longer, I called her. After 4 rings, she answered, noticeably panting. I inquired about her heavy breathing, and she explained that the hotel elevator had broken down, forcing her to climb the stairs to her room. We talked for a while, and I did my best to maintain a calm and steady voice. Eventually, I mentioned that I was going to bed, wished her good night, hung up, and swiftly sent a command to the spy program, requesting a rapid series of pictures using the front camera. Her mistake occurred right then. After our call, she placed the phone beside the bedside table, not on the bedside table. As a result, the front-facing camera started capturing slightly tilted but candid photos. These images revealed her sitting astride someone else, with her head thrown back. Following that, a recording captured unmistakable sounds, instantly exposing her actions. That was my final straw, and I documented these notes and materials. At that point, she had become a stranger to me. From that moment on, I refrained from further investigation until Sunday because everything had become painfully clear. I was pondering my next steps. Should I pursue a divorce? What about our 6-year-old daughter? On Sunday, late at night, she returned home, eager to kiss me. I pulled away, telling her I was still unwell. I had an urge to confront her and let my anger out. Instead, I retreated to the office and slept on the sofa. The following morning, I woke up before her, couldn't bear to be around her any longer, and headed to work. I endured the day mechanically, then approached my boss and urgently requested a week's vacation. I saved all the proof on a flash drive and then phoned my wife. I told her I had to go on a one-day business trip but asked her not to take our daughter away from her grandmother because I had a surprise planned. That night, when I returned home, I packed my bag quickly. She helped me pack, acting politely and innocently. However, her insincerity made me angry. I took my bag, left the USB drive on the bedroom nightstand, and called a taxi to our second apartment, the one set aside for our daughter. Once there, I called a friend and suggested going abroad for a few days. He agreed, and we hastily booked tickets for an early morning flight to Munich. It was in Munich that I confessed everything to him. We explored the city and socialized with other women, and I no longer had any feelings for my wife. I ignored her calls and only messaged her to insert the USB drive into my laptop. After about 30 minutes, my phone started ringing non-stop, and I received numerous messages, but I didn't care anymore, so I turned off my phone. We continued our adventures in Munich for 3 more days. Before I flew back home on Saturday. When I returned, I turned on my phone, and it took me 5 minutes to review several messages from my wife. However, I chose not to read them because I wanted clarification before entering the apartment. When I entered, it was oddly quiet inside. I quietly placed my bag down, removed my shoes, and was about to wash my hands when she emerged from the bedroom. Oh my goodness, I had never seen her looking so disheveled and swollen with tears streaming down her face. She dropped to her knees, trying to explain something incoherently amidst her sobs and tears. I maintained a stoic expression, urging her not to make a scene. Then, composedly, I asked her about our next steps. She begged me for forgiveness, once again drowning in tears and mucus. She admitted she had made a terrible mistake, claiming she didn't understand how things had reached this point. She even started calling herself names and so on. But, I no longer felt sympathy or anger toward her. She cried out that she loved me and had always loved only me, and that all of this had happened because she had been foolish and realized during my absence that she had ruined our relationship. But as they say, revenge is best served cold. I told her we were no longer husband and wife, just mom and dad for our daughter. We would pretend everything was okay, but I would live my life, and she could live hers. She was no longer the only one in my life. She was my partner in raising our child. Maybe someday I'll change my mind, but for now, the thought of being intimate with her makes me sick. By the way, I told her where I had been and what I had been doing. She said she understood everything and was willing to endure whatever it took. Well, no one forced her to speak. As a result, we now share the same apartment, although, to be honest, I've already purchased another one for myself and put it in my father's name to avoid property disputes. I spend most of my time in the office, although I occasionally sleep in the bedroom for my daughter's sake. A few times, my wife tried to hug me when we shared a bed, but I rejected her firmly. It's been 3 months since we were intimate. She hasn't confided in her parents. Only her father knows about my situation. We agreed to take a family vacation once a year for a week, but now we'd have separate beds. I often hang out with friends and have made new acquaintances, including some attractive women. Sometimes, I wonder when she'll reach a breaking point and leave or file for divorce, but she hasn't yet. I frequently catch her staring at me like a scared cat. But honestly, I don't care. Even though I see her making efforts, I find satisfaction in her pain. Recently, I put a pack of rubbers on my office desk to taunt her. Despite her reaction, she entered the office to say something, noticed the rubbers on the table, and hurried out, probably in tears. She still goes to work but doesn't stay late anymore, although I don't really keep tabs on her. At some point, she tried to explain that she had severed all non-business ties with another man. She'll still need to communicate with him for work-related matters, but she swears she doesn't approach him now. By the way, that guy also has a family. I told her that her relationships with sexual partners are none of my concern, and she's free to do as she pleases. She doesn't need to inform me about her intimate encounters. I also stay out late sometimes now, leaving when my daughter goes to bed on Friday nights, for example. Naturally, I don't hold back when it comes to my desires. If I want sex, it happens. In the morning, I go to the office to sleep or to the bedroom if she's not there anymore. There haven't been any changes in our daily routine at home. I continue to do the grocery shopping, and I enjoy cooking. We still have a housekeeper for cleaning, so that aspect remains the same. I've been covering the rent for the apartment, and I still am. I'm not concerned about how or if she's spending her money. Our communication is limited to our daughter or her parents when they visit. However, I have a feeling that if I were to tell my mother-in-law, she might confront her right in front of me. I have a good relationship with my mother-in-law. She's an intelligent woman who values family strongly. This is probably one reason why my wife doesn't want to leave. It seems like she's afraid of her mom because she knows her mother would ask what's going on, and I won't lie. In general, I tease my wife as much as I can and enjoy it. Maybe I've become a monster now, but she's the one who brought this out in me. And you know what surprises me? Her persistence and patience. It's like a challenge to me. I wonder how much more she can endure. And please don't start with the whole, she's the mother of your child, blah, blah, blah. She didn't care much about that when she was involved with that guy for half a year. She was going on business trips or having affairs in this city without thinking about our daughter or her husband. No comment. Whenever I feel like I might soften, I remember that day and what I felt, and it strengthens my resolve. I become unyielding again. So this is how I'm living now. Our daughter is doing well. We're good parents, and I still help her with her evening schoolwork. Our mutual friends are unaware of our situation. When I get tired of tormenting her or decide enough is enough, I'll switch off my hostile mode and have a conversation with her, but not right now. Not now. Thank you.